Yeah. Okay, good. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's actually has been a while since I presented over Zoom, so hopefully I'm not going to be too slow. Yeah, if you have any questions or you're not hear something, just let me know. You can either put it in chat or just let me know and then I can repeat. But first of all, yeah, thank you so much for having me here, and special thank you for Professor Pear for inviting me. It's actually my first time presenting at Hong Kong Polytechnic University, I think. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. You can see my slides, right? Oh. Yeah. Yeah. So I work in New Zealand at the University of Auckland Business School, where I'm in a marketing department. And I'm also disciplinary lead for consumer research and marketing science. And the other side of my role is that I'm also director of Career Studies Center at New Zealand Asia Institute, which is looking at various ways that our university engages with Asia. And I look after the Korean side in particular. So a lot of my research is actually kind of intertwined some of these roles. In terms of my research, my main research domain is consumer behavior. And I guess maybe a little bit unique about my background is that I use both consumer psychology, so using experiments like field experiments and lab experiments to understand behavior. But I also have a training in qualitative methods, like doing things like ethnography and ethnographies and interviews to derive more cultural insights. So my research interest has been changing a lot through my career, but at the moment, I'm interested in how do consumers make inferences about culture and symbolic objects such as luxury brands, which I think has relevance to to fashion. So, for instance, in one study, we looked at how do consumers make inferences about advertise using artworks in advertising, and under what conditions this is helpful for Korean brands or other brands that are not from Europe in positioning themselves as luxury brands. The other area of my research is marketplace morality. So I'm interested in how consumers render moral judgment on brand transgressions or how do them engage in prosocial behaviors. And so, for example, in this domain, one of the studies we looked at was looking at K-pop consumption and looking at how consumers kind of justify the use of other cultures and dealing with this increasing issue of cultural appropriation in the industry and how they justify their own consumption against that. And lastly, last bit of my research looking at consumer well-being and looking at different concepts or things that marketers can do in order to improve consumer well-being. So for example, my PhD student and I we looked at mindfulness and how the practice of mindfulness or meditation and things like that shape actually people's choices and behaviors towards increasing well-being. Right? So the project that I'm presenting today, I tried to incorporate some of these things, but also chose the context of luxury, given that this is presentation to a fashion school. And the context really just set a broader domain. It's sustainable luxury research, right? So just a couple of definitions. So basically, sustainable luxury, it refers to different things that luxury brands do to strengthen the ethical standards and minimize environmental impact, right? And that can take a lot of different forms, right? So it could be things like improving production process, right? So, for example, Gucci's fur-free initiative, or it could be committing to corporate social responsibility activities, like when a company sets up, a charitable fund to alleviate some sort of pro-social cause, right? Or it could be something to do with more selling to brand identity and advertising, where brand tries to imbue this kind of like, more sustainable identity and what they stand for in the marketplace. So these kind of things are all very distinct. But because my main domain of research is consumer behavior, what I'm interested in, for me, it's interesting to study sustainable luxury if it meets two conditions, right? One is that whatever we're talking about, these practices need to be either unique to luxury brands, so only luxury brands can do that, or somehow engaging in these practices may create a different kind of effect in luxury context than in a non-luxury context. Because, for example, any company doesn't need to be a luxury company can engage in CSR activities, right? But unless this kind of practice generates a unique effect in luxury branding, it's not really research on sustainable luxury, right? And the second one, I think for this kind of research to be interesting, it needs to be also have a significant effect on consumer preference when we compare what sustainable luxury practices add to luxury branding. So in other words, if luxury companies do that, does it significantly change the way the consumers perceive these brands or not, right? So for me, when I look at research in this domain, it needs to meet these two criteria, right? And the focal point we're starting off with is really this, right? I mean, we all know sustainability is important, but do consumers actually care, right? So in other words, does doing something sustainable make consumers evaluate luxury brands more favorably? And if so, why it is the case and when it happens? Any thoughts on that? Anyone to have an opinion? No, maybe? No, not really. Yeah. What do you guys think? Do consumers care if luxury brands do something sustainable? And if so, if they care, why do they care? Not sure. Okay. So, I mean, there could be a lot of, so from what I've seen in the literature in general, I think the answer could be something like this. So, generally, they might, right? And if they do care, so if the answer is yes, typically this kind of effect on preference does not really occur because sustainability somehow makes a luxury brand better, like in terms of its core characteristics. It's more likely to be a sort of sense of moral duty kind of thing, right? So we can prefer sustainable luxury brands to luxury brands because we think it's the right thing to do, right? So it's kind of like a moral duty kind of effect. So rather than seeing the product itself being more superior, it's more to do with the idea that it's a right thing to do. Yeah. Um, so if we and then we have some evidence for it, and this is how I summarize the literature like in my head, right? Um, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to. I've got this bar in the middle that I can't see my slides. Um, yeah, maybe this way. Um, yeah. So, for example, yeah, what we find in a lot of different studies is that generally sustainable luxury can create a more positive effect over, what I call baseline luxury. It's an improved evaluation of luxury brands if consumers have some sort of salience of moral concerns, right? So when they think, for example, about morality, such as when moral identity is very central to them, so they feel that they need to do something very moral. In that case, they tend to have more higher perception or higher value of sustainable luxury brands than luxury brands, right? On the other hand, there's also evidence to show that when these kind of concerns are not salient, so for example, they think about something else like status, right? Then sustainable appeals in luxury branding might not be effective. They might be, generate similar. So it's not that people punish sustainable luxury brands, they may not care about that, right? And there's also research which shows that when concerns about sustainability liability is salient, so people start thinking about, okay, because this is a sustainable luxury brand, right? Maybe it's a lesser quality or less durable, or they could think about it doesn't communicate status as much. Then it could be that the opposite could be true, and that the baseline luxury is actually better as a sustainable luxury, right? So in general, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of research talks about, how do we increase preference for sustainable luxury brands? But the pathway towards it tends to be moral responsibilization of consumption, right? It's the right thing to do. So in our research, we wanted to look at ways that maybe there could be some other pathways, right? So don't make consumers feel guilty about uh, 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 not making consumers guilty about something about moral duty or sustainability duty. And is there a way to make consumers generally prefer that luxury, like sustainable luxury brands, intrinsically prefer these luxury brands, right? And I think there is a way to do that because there's a lot of different ways in which um, uh, sustainability can be enacted. So in our research, we're focusing on that maybe one way of that is looking what is upcycling and what unique effect it has in luxury consumption. Sorry, I think there's some questions in chat, right? Sorry, I'm not really good with like looking at my slides and looking at the chat at the same time. That means ordinary consumers or people who, yeah. So it's basically consumers who interested in luxury brands. And, right. Um, ta-da. Yeah. So a lot of my research looking at consumers, general consumers. Okay. So upcycling. Some of you might have heard of it and probably know about this more than me. In a basic way, my understanding of it is that upcycling, it involves some sort of transformation of discarded waste materials into something new. And it is different from recycling, at least perceptually, because recycling typically involves that breaking down used materials to raw materials and then creating something else. Whereas with upcycling, there's still some traces of the old material, right? That then repurposed and transformed into something new and more valuable, right? And there I have some kind of the pictures that I could find of upcycled products that you can still see some bits and pieces of the old product, but essentially it's a new product that was transformed uh, in this process, right? Now, we were not the first one to look at upcycling effects and how do consumers judge it. And generally, there are two kind of explanations of why upcycling or how upcycling can influence consumer perceptions. The one pathway is similar to what I've just talked about, sustainability. Essentially, the argument goes that, upcycling is good for environment, and arguably it's even better than recycling, right? Because you don't completely destroy it, use less energy. So consumers may evaluate upcycled products more positively, right? So it's that kind of like a guilt trap, right? That's saying, okay, so it's a moral thing to do. The other effect, which is more interesting, is to do with idea that upcycled products can be perceived as more innovative. And the reason why is because consumers, when they look at upcycled products, they might be prompted to think about what's the previous life of this materials object was prior to this transformation. So the product itself, the results of it, think, oh, this product is actually very creative. Right? Now, in our research, we propose a different path. And we argue that beyond creativity and beyond sustainability, in the context of luxury consumption, and it's only in the context of luxury consumption, the upcycled product can generate more preference for luxury brands because it enhances consumer perceptions about creators' essence that imbued in the upcycled product. Right. And that essence, in turn, is derived from the idea that to make an upcycled product, it requires a lot of effort from the brand. So brand needs to spend a lot of time to think about how I'm going to change this old product to something new. So spend a lot of time of it, which increases consumer perception that it's actually reflects more of the brand's essence and thereby increases preference. So I'm going to break it down exactly what I mean by that. Uh, so the theory that we use here, and to understand this process, is called contagion in essence. So contagion essentially involves the idea about or beliefs, lay beliefs about the transfer of essence. That is, so it's the idea that objects can become different in meaning or properties, because they are seen as possessing essence or the essence of something else contaged this object. And to put it kind of like, give you an example, a real example is, so I visited Florence in February, and in Florence, for those of you who've been, there's this statue of I forgot what's called in Italian. It's a pig, right? And all the tourists, they touch this pig because they think it's a good luck, right? They believe that, by touching this pig, you get the luck from the pig rubs off onto you, right? And in a lot of like different touristy places, you see a lot of things like that, right? There's another one in Prague where people touch the dog statue, right? Or there's one in what was it in New York, the bull, right? The people think that if they touch the bull, they become richer because the essence of of that place transfers to you and become more lucky or successful and things like that, right? But this research, this kind of contagion effect is also been documented in marketing. And the idea was that, for example, it's like, consumers are more likely to pay significant amount of money for the same t-shirt if it's being worn by some sort of celebrity, for instance, right? Or in the retail context, this field experiments showed that when an item like a t-shirt has been worn by somebody more attractive, somebody very attractive, people think that that product is they're more likely to purchase it as well, right? So the idea here is that it's not that the product somehow is different, but it has this kind of like magical essence from the contagion source because something touched it. Now, when it comes to creative essence and luxury brands, creative essence is really what we mean by creative essence is first the idea that the products is how much the products reflect the essence of a brand, right? Of what the brand stands for and the meaning of it. This is essence is very important for luxury brands because ultimately, when people think about luxury brands, they think about, the brand DNA is really important, right? The symbolism is very important. So in the context of luxury brands, because the value is largely symbolic, having more essence or perceiving that given product reflects more essence of the brand should increase consumer preference for that brand, right? Now, interestingly, and the example here is of Hermes Birkin bag, right? It's really expensive because people think it's the original of it reflects what Hermes is about as a brand, right? And people prepared to pay a ridiculous amount of money for this. Yeah. Um, yeah. So in marketing literature and consumer behavior literature, the key thing is actually people don't know about whether the product is, how much effort or how much or sold, and how much um, brand actually related to essence, but they can make inferences. So they can make guesses, and they use a lot of different heuristics to do so. So, for example, we know that original source of production matters because people think that products done in original source of production have more of this creator's essence. An example could be if you go to Seattle, there's a Starbucks coffee. That was the original Starbucks that, the Starbucks started in Seattle. And there are lots of people there trying to buy Starbucks coffee. Now, pragmatically speaking, coffee in this Starbucks is no different from any other Starbucks. But people believe that this is original and therefore it has this kind of Starbucks essence in it, right? The also example about serial numbers. So research shows that when it comes to limited edition and the things come with serial numbers, people prefer the brands that have lower products that have lower serial numbers than those that have high serial numbers. So for example, this one is 0148. If this was 0128, people actually think it's much more valuable than 0148 because the smaller the number, the more people perceive it's closer to the creator, right? And has this created more of a creator's essence. And more recently, they showed that one of the reasons why AI designed luxury, people don't like AI designed luxury is because they feel that when it's designed by AI, it loses that brand essence, right? It loses this contagion from a brand because brand didn't actually put that much time or effort in creating it. Right? So essence is very important aspects of creator's essence, very important aspects of luxury branding. Now, when we come back to upcycling, I think the similar kind of thing can happen. And largely because upcycling involves the process of transformation of something old into something new. And generally, if you think about it, when people think about transformation, they think it's a difficult thing to do because it's not something we encounter every day, right? So in other words, because a lot of things are mass produced, when you think about upcycling, it should involve more effort from a brand to create an upcycled item than a generic item. And therefore, because consumers think that the brand spend more effort in making it, they're more likely to infer that these kind of products contain more of the brand's essence than the standard editions of the same product, right? So an example I have, if you are research students, you can publish an article that takes 6 years, or you can publish an article that takes 1 year. And generally, you feel that the article that took longer for you to publish or to work on, the bigger project, reflects of more of who you are and has more of your essence than the projects that took less time to publish. Um, so Yeah, so that just to reiterate, we think that upcycle luxury brands would generate more preference from consumers than normal brands because people see them as having more of this creator's essence or brand's essence, which in turn derive from idea that brand put a lot of time and effort in creating these products. Yeah, so far so good. Questions? No? All good? All right. So we did 4.5 studies. So like I said, my background was originally in qualitative research. So what we did actually originally was we did some interviews with managers of a luxury brand. And we also did an ethnography of different kind of like forums of what people talk about luxury. Sorry, about upcycle luxury. And then when we look at different discussions, we did find, confirmation that, some people thought, look, yeah, upcycling is good because of sustainability, right? It's good for sustainable product. I mean, because of it's good for environment. We also found some evidence of what people talk about creativity, that, these kind of products seem to be, new or creative because they transform something old into something new. But in addition to these two already identified themes, we also saw some evidence of this, what we call the creator's essence, that it really truly represents what the brand stands for, right? That, expresses brand's individuality or what is true about the brand, right? So we had some evidence that, it might be a thing. The consumers might think that way. And then after this pilot study, we carried on to conduct a series of experiments. And our very first one was it was relative. So we had three conditions, right? And one of the conditions is that we showed people three different kind of like products. Well, three versions of the same product, right? So there was luxury condition, the normal condition. There was upcycled luxury condition, and there was vintage luxury condition. And then we asked people to rate how much essence do they think that this brand contains, and then how much they like it, brand attitude, and also whether they think it's sustainable. So whether how much sustainability value this product conveys, right? And also some manipulation checks. So this was kind of the stimuli that we used, right? Essentially, we showed exactly the same image of the same product, but we altered description. So in control condition, we said it's a new collection. In upcycle condition, we said it is upcycled from our past vintage collection. And in a vintage condition, we said that it was one of the past vintage collection from the same brand, right? So people saw only one version of this stimuli. And then we did manipulation checks and we asked them, okay, so what is the best description of this product? And as we would intend, for upcycle condition, most people say it's upcycled product. For control condition, most people say it's just luxury product. And in vintage condition, people say it's a vintage product, right? So here's the results. I prefer numbers to graphs, but essentially, if you look at this, what it shows is that in terms of brand attitude, upcycle condition was more preferred than control condition or vintage. So in other words, people liked the product when it was upcycled much more than when it was control or vintage condition, right? And they also thought it reflected more creator's essence than control condition or vintage condition, right? Which is consistent with our predictions. Now, we also measured sustainability value, and we found that the upcycle condition was perceived as more sustainable than control condition, but actually not that more different from the vintage collection, right? But nevertheless, because sustainability value was significant, what we did a mediation analysis. So we tried to look at this pathway that we theorize works. And what we found that the effect of upcycle condition on brand attitude was mediated by creator's essence. So creator's essence explained the effect of why people liked the upcycled product. And this was also true when we compared upcycle to vintage condition, even when we control for sustainability value, right? So in other words, even over beyond sustainability, creator's essence explained the effect of why people like upcycled products. Yeah. So far, so good? Yeah. It's kind of hard to see on Zoom when people follow it up, but yeah. All right. So study two. So in study two, what we did is we wanted to test the mechanism further because remember I said the reason why upcycling effect happens is because people think that it's more effortful to create upcycled products. So we did exactly that. So what we did is we had two conditions, luxury and upcycled luxury, and we focused on Hermes. We said there's a wallet, right? And we told them it's either generic wallet or it's upcycled wallet, right? Then we measured effort, we measured creator's essence, we measured brand attitudes, so same as study one. And then we also checked for innovativeness, where people thought that this brand, the upcycle product is more innovative and that could explain our effect. So here's the results. As you can see, the upcycle condition was much more preferred the control condition than the normal luxury brand. It elicited more perceptions of essence, right? Perceiving more creators' essence, and also more effort. That people thought it was much more effort, takes much more effort to create upcycled brand than control brand, right? There wasn't much different in innovativeness, but we still controlled for it when we did a serial mediation model. So essentially, we tested the effect of upcycling on brand attitude via effort and creators' essence. And even if we controlled for brand familiarity, perceived innovativeness, the effect still held, right? So people thought that creators' essence explains the effect of upcycling on brand attitude. Um, is it okay? Yeah. Okay, so in study three, what we wanted to do is we do what we call a moderation of process analysis. And here, so far, we asked people if they thought that, the upcycle brands were more effortful or if they created more essence. Here, we wanted to test whether effort is really the underlying mechanism behind why, sorry. I don't know about attendance certificate for this seminar. Maybe you need to ask your professor. Um, sorry, there's some question in the chat about attendance certificate for this seminar. I think maybe somebody else can answer that. So we argue that it's effort that determines or explains why upcycled products are preferred more by brands than non-upcycled. And if this is true, if people perceive that upcycled products do not involve effort from the brand, then contagion should not happen, right? Because if brands did not put effort into that, there's no reason why it should be perceived as having more essence, and therefore the effect that we hypothesize should not happen. We wanted to test this kind of mechanism here. So we had three conditions. We had luxury condition, we had upcycled condition like previous studies, and we also had upcycled by a third party. So in other words, this upcycled condition did not require any effort from a brand, right? So the way we kind of did it is that we showed them hypothetical brand called Lana. We told them it's a luxury brand. And we told them that this brand either belongs to, it's part of, latest luxury collection. Then we told them that it was upcycled by the brand using in-house creative technical expertise. Or in a no effort upcycling, we told people that it was upcycled, but it wasn't by the brand, it was carried out by a third party, right? So both of these conditions are upcycled, but one involves effort from the brand and one didn't, right? So if our hypothesis is true, then upcycled should be better than control, but no effort upcycling should not be better than control because it does not include essence, right? So then we asked them what is the best description of this product. And as you can see, in the control condition, people chose that it's a luxury product. But in the other two, they both chose that it's upcycled product, right? So there's no difference in perception of upcycling between no effort and high effort from a brand. The next, what we did was we also tested whether our manipulation of effort was successful, right? So we basically asked people, how much effort do you think the brand put in making it? And here, like we found that actually upcycle with effort condition, right? People thought that it was much more effortful than the normal control condition and upcycle with no effort condition. But what we also found, and we did not expect it, is that if upcycle with no effort condition generated even less effort than control condition, right? So people thought that when it's upcycled by somebody else, the company should put much less effort. Then we compared purchase intention and creator's essence, and consistent with our predictions, well, we found that when we compare to control condition, upcycled brand effort was much more positively evaluated, right? But when we compare upcycled no effort to control condition, there was no difference. So in other words, upcycled products were not evaluated more positively than just general products, right? When we looked at creator's essence, we had similar pattern. So creator's essence was perceived highest among for upcycled brand effort condition versus the control and upcycled no effort. But also, because we had a pattern with similar where we had a pattern of effort, people for the control condition required more effort than upcycled with no effort from a brand, right? And then we did mediation analysis, and we found that, as we would expect, um, the greatest essence mediate effect when we compared upcycle with effort versus control and upcycle with effort versus upcycle with no effort. But when it comes to comparing upcycle with no effort versus control, we still got an effect, but it was negative effect. So in other words, um, the effect was kind of like that. People, effort essence mattered, but it was in the opposite direction. Yeah. All right. So far we provided evidence that creator's essence can explain the effect of upcycling, and that effect happens due to effort perceptions from a brand, right? What we do in study 4, we want to show that this effect would be salient only for luxury brands, or at least for luxury brands, this effect should be stronger. The reason why is because if you think about contagion means that you like the brand more because it has some sort of brand's essence, which means that if you like the brand's essence more, the effect should be stronger. But if you don't like brand essence of the brand in the first place, even if contagion happens, it's not necessarily going to improve your attitudes about this brand, right? So what we did in this study, we recruited 900 people and we randomly assigned them to one of the 6 conditions in a 2 by 3 design. So it was upcycle versus standard brand times the brand type. So we had one luxury brand, which is Stella McCarthy, right? Which has positive essence. And we have 2 fast fashion brands, H&M and Shein, right? The idea was that for the last 2, people would not like that essence as much as they like Stella McCarthy's essence. So if that's true, then upcycling effect we theorized should become stronger for Stella McCarthy, but not for the other 2. Yeah. So what we did basically, we had exactly the same description of the product, upcycled product or the standard product, but we manipulated the brand of which brand it came from. So it was either H&M, Stella, or Shein. And then we asked them how interested they would be to find out about this brand more or about this product more by asking simple question, yes or no, right? And then we also measured creator's essence, right? How much essence of this brand do you thought the product has contained? The results were quite interesting. So, so for manipulation check, we also asked them what kind of brand it was. And obviously for Stella McCarthy, more people thought that it's a luxury brand than for the other 2, right? So the manipulation was successful. Um, and same, we asked for about upcycling, and then everybody correctly identified that upcycle condition was indeed upcycling, and standard condition was standard condition, right? Um, so these are the percentages for how much interest consumers have shown, right? So in a control condition, when we ask people how much you're interested in finding more about this product, Stella McCartney was 38, but in upcycle it was 65. So it was huge champion interest for upcycle versus control, which is consistent with our previous results, right? But interestingly, when we look at H&M and Shein, there was no effect of upcycling on interest. So regardless of whether it was upcycled or control, people did not actually want to find out more about this product, right? And there was a significant interaction between brand and upcycling, such that when we compare Stella with H&M, there was significant interaction, and also Stella with Shein. Yeah. So in other words, the effect that we hypothesized of upcycling on preference, right? It differed by the type of brand, such that it only emerged for luxury brands, but did not emerge for the other 2 brands. Now, then when we looked at creator's essence, this was even more interesting because for creator's essence, regardless of which brand it was, people thought that upcycled edition had more of that brand's essence, right? So in other words, regardless if it's luxury brand or not, people thought it created more essence. But even though it created more of the essence, if you don't like that essence, then it shouldn't increase your preference, right? So that's why this effect is unique for luxury brands because people generally like luxury brands more. So therefore, when they think it's more, the product is more of this luxury brand, obviously the effect is stronger. So to summarize, right? So what we find here is that upcycled luxury can increase consumer preference of luxury brands. And at least in part, this effect is driven by the notion that these kind of products, they are imbued with more creator's essence, right? And this creator's essence in turn derived from the idea that the brands actually put more effort in creating upcycled products, right? Than the standard products that they sell. Okay, so overall, if you recall that my one of my very first slide, I said that from consumer research point of view, sustainable luxury research is interesting if one we find some sort of effect that's unique to luxury brands and it doesn't occur for non-luxury brands, right? Because otherwise it's just sustainability research. And the second point was that for this kind of research to work, there needs to be some sort of shift in preference relatively to control, right? So in other words, whatever you're doing, you need to increase preference for the brands over and above what they already like about it, right? So, and I think in this paper, so we do both, right? First, we find that unique effect that happens for luxury brands when they do upcycling via creator's essence, right? As we showed in study 4. But also we show that the creator's essence is derived from effort inferences and this effect is, and this effect actually increases preference for luxury brands, right? So reverse. So this part is about point B. It increases preference for luxury brands, and this only happens for luxury brands and does not necessarily happen for fast fashion brands or other brands that do not possess this kind of like positive creative essence in the first place. Right. So that's kind of pretty much it. Yeah, so happy to have a discussion and answer any question you have. We went actually this through quick. I do find that if I present on the Zoom, it goes much faster than if you present in person. But yeah, any comments or this is still work in progress. So anything you're not sure about or want to ask, please feel free to ask questions.
Okay. I will kick things off with the question of mine while other people preparing their question. So my question is about manipulation. Did you manipulate upcycling only based on only description?
Yeah, yeah, we just told them it's upcycled product. So it
Because
was exactly the same product, but we just told people that it was upcycled from previous materials,
already
from previous collection.
okay, and then is it possible for participant to it is possible to manipulate the luxury brand using fictional brand because it doesn't seem
Uh,
easy to make
oh,
yeah
I think from the research kind of package, empirical package point of view, right? We have 3 studies that use real brands. So study 1 use real brand, study 2 use real brand, study
yeah
4
yeah
use real brand. So you need at least one brand that doesn't use a real brand to kind of rule out alternative explanations. So because the results are consistent across all studies, then that study I think is good. We need it because otherwise people say, oh, maybe it's unique to Hermes or maybe it's unique to Louis Vuitton. So, okay, no, we got these results in different brands, but we also have one condition where basically the same brand, they don't know anything about it. The only thing they know about it's a luxury brand.
maybe there is another
I have some, sorry, yeah, so there's normally how many people do you survey in each study? Good question. I think it depends on your design and how strong you think the effect is. This is consumer inference studies. So I think the effects is actually can be quite small. So typically I would have at least 100 people per cell if it's online study. But in this case, we were conservative. We had 200 people per cell. So in other words, if you have two conditions, we had 400 people. If you have three conditions, we had 600 people. And if you have six conditions, we had 900 people. And there's
Yeah,
another
there is another
question.
question. Yeah.
Where do you think this result can be applied to upcycled products in other fields? For example, upcycled food. Um, mm, I think it could be applied to other. It doesn't necessarily need to be fashion, but it has to be something that the two things basically need to happen based on our study, right? One is that people need to believe that it's that companies or brands put a lot of effort in making it, right? And the other condition is that people need to already think that this brand has a positive essence, right? So in other words, it might apply to food, but I don't know what upcycled food actually is, right? Because there's might people think that I don't know, yeah, what is upcycled food? Like it would be like you take leftovers and then make it into a new meal. There, I think people are quite sensitive to food is a unique context. So people can be quite sensitive to food because there's also that contagion can be also negative, right? They might think about it has, the contagion from previous from previous owners, so that it might not necessarily work the same way. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, I think, luxury brand. It could be any brand that has this positive essence, because the idea is that the reason why this effect works is because people already think the brand is good, but this upcycled product is kind of like represents the brand's core attribute, if it makes sense. So maybe not food, but a lot of other categories should work. Yeah.
Do you have any more question? There is one more question in the chat.
Where? You can just ask, you don't need to put it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more question. So in your research, does creator refers to well-known creators or luxury brand designer?
Uh, we kind of we in our study we created creator's essence to the brand essence. It's basically those positive things that people think about the brand. It's like almost like brand identity. So the questions were like, Richard, we're asking how much do you think this product reflects what the brand stands for, or the value of the brand, or like something true to the brand's identity, something like that. So it's kind of like the symbolic value of the brand. But I think it works well for luxury brands because people always associate that they tend to anthropomorphize luxury brands, that there's a designer behind it. So if the brand put a lot of effort, it's similar to how a person puts a lot of effort in making it.
So it's kind of a synergistic effect between luxury brand and sustainability.
Sorry?
I mean, your research about the synergistic effect
Mhm.
between luxury
Yeah,
luxury
yeah,
brand.
yeah. It's kind of like the idea here is like you do something sustainable, but people like it not because it's morally good or not because it's good for environment. You actually like it more because you like the brand. No, sorry, this paper is not published yet. It's still work in progress. We will submit it soon, but I haven't wrote it up yet.
Well,
I only have PowerPoint slides.
your finding provides a lot of insight. Yeah, to us. Do you have any question? Not anymore. Basically, Hong Kong.
Hmm?
Yeah, another question.
When switching to different, so yeah, we control for sustainability value, and we control for innovativeness because those two things are kind of like the main explanations for upcycling. We control for brand familiarity as well, so because more familiar people like could bias people. But that's about it. Yeah. So generally, I prefer not to have too many control variables, but if there are alternative explanations, I like to manipulate it or kind of like, yeah. So that's why we have study three. Study three, I think, is really important because we manipulate effort, right? And we show if it's upcycling, but then it does not involve efforts from the brand. Actually, the effect does not happen. Yeah, so it's not just about upcycling, it's upcycling by the brand. And similar in study four, we show even if brand puts effort, but if you don't like that brand, then actually there's no effect of upcycling either.
As I know, Stella McCartney used this kind of strategy, right? Stella
Uh,
McCartney. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So it is same effect on other kinds of a luxury brand.
Yeah. With big well, theoretically, yes, because we had like what did we use? We used Stella McCartney, we used fake brand, we used Hermes, and we used Louis Vuitton. So it's kind of the results were consistent, right? So it should work.
Okay, I hope so. Yeah, how about no, not anymore. Okay. On behalf of SFT PolyU, I'd like to thank you, Professor Yurisa, for your truly thought-provoking talk. Okay. Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah, you're joining everybody. Okay.
Hopefully it was interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.